Today we are blessed to have two wonderful presenters. The first of which is kind of lingering in the back there, Mr. Wayne Finley. Just a quick word on Wayne. He is an English professor at Usong University.
Yes, I am, same as Daniel.
As is Daniel.
Yeah.
So just a moment on what I remember from Wayne. You heard the music playing there earlier. He was the first person from whom I got the idea that you could play music to kind of set a coffee shop atmosphere. An insight that has influenced my teaching ever since, no lie. And also he recently gave a TEDx talk, which is very impressive. So, without any further ranting from me, Wayne Finley, everybody.
Okay, thank you. Nice introduction. So yes, actually that does work if you play music before your class, and even when you give students speaking activities. I found if you say, okay, talk to your classmate, play some like relaxing coffee shop music, they feel much more relaxed. I think also it helps mask what their classmates might be listening to. So I think that's very good. But today I want to talk about a very different topic. This topic has affected me several times during my career. Maybe even 2 weeks ago, I suffered from this again. This is, of course, burnout. I imagine everybody has some experience with this. It's inevitable, I think. It's one of the pitfalls that you'll face as a teacher. So I just want you to get quickly warmed up, talk for a few minutes with somebody next to you. What's your experience with burnout? If you could just ask somebody next to you, a few minutes, what's your experience? If I could just get a few examples, would anybody like to share an experience with teacher burnout? Yeah.
Using the same book year after year, doing the same lesson.
Yes,
year after year, semester after semester, just kind of really drains you, makes you less excited to go to class.
Yes, I remember when I first came to Korea, I taught in a Hagwon, and I would teach the same lesson plan 5 times in 1 week. And I just, by the 5th time, you really started to hate that kind of lesson plan. So I guess that would be kind of an emotional burnout, just bored of what you're actually doing in the classroom. Anybody have a different kind of burnout?
I think with the same email every year. Oh, teacher, I got a C++, I really need a B.
Oh, just wanting that higher grade.
Yeah, I'm begging for grades, that's every term.
Actually, last year I worked for an international college where we have lots of students coming from places like Uzbekistan, from Mongolia, and they were always fighting for scholarships. And so I would share an office with some of those major content professors, and literally there would be a line outside the door, like 10 students long, just waiting to complain about their grade at the end of the semester. So at the end of the semester, you will see it in that building. So I think that would be an issue. As I said, I've experienced burnout many times. If I think to the first time I experienced it, as I said, when I first came to Korea, has anybody here taught in a Hagwon, an academy, or is still teaching? For me, that is a very natural environment to experience burnout. The first problem I had, I was a new teacher when I arrived, and I wasn't so confident in my abilities back then. And I don't know, in your Hagwons, do you have this? CCTV cameras? Yes, so we had CCTV cameras, and to make it worse, at the end of the corridor was the director's room, and she was always watching the TV screens. And literally, if there was any kind of perceived error in your classroom, for example, when I first started teaching, I wrote all in capital letters. She would literally bang on the door. Immediate feedback. And so the door would open, and yes, I would be told, change the writing. One teacher there, I remember, he had to go to the office for about 20 seconds. He forgot a handout. And on the camera, the director saw a student using their cell phone. And then he came back to the classroom, and then after the class, he actually got a warning letter. And so this kind of environment put me under a very heavy strain. Actually, after only 2 weeks after the director was watching my classes, I was called into the office by the nice head teacher. He was from Leeds, actually, in England. And he said, well, I've got some bad news. He gave me in a very official document And it was, there's a lot of writing on there. It said, I remember the first sentence, Mr. Finley is a boring teacher. And so, depending on the environment, that can really lead to a lot of burnout. And I remember when I got, how do you think I felt when I got that letter? I was new to teaching, not confident, and I was being watched ruthlessly. And of course, that same day, I almost quit teaching. Yeah.
Who wrote "He is a boring teacher"?
I assume it came from the director, and it was not a student. Well, actually, if we go into that, what happened is there was a detention system in the academy, and if you had a bad student that day, you could make them stay after class. And so I had one student who was playing up, and I used that system. And then when he got home, his mom asked him, "Oh, why were you in detention?" And he said, "My teacher was boring." And so she called the director, and immediately I got the warning letter. And to be fair, I think there was some truth in that. I wasn't some engaging teacher back then. But I remember going downstairs. The Hog One was in one of those nice office tel buildings, into Angelina's Coffee. And the same day, I was literally looking for different kinds of jobs, like volunteering in different countries. So burnout can have a horrible effect. And pretty much it took me a very long time, months and months, to ever feel comfortable. Even now, sometimes I'm teaching, I think there's like a camera in the corner. I'm like, oh, I've made a mistake. Someone's going to burst into the room. What I want to talk about now, I gave you some of the causes from my first experience. What do you think causes this burnout? If we think burnout is this point where you think, oh, it's very difficult to keep going, I've had enough, I've lost all my energy. What causes it? Just talk to your partner again for a few minutes. So, I kind of revealed some of the causes of burnout that I have suffered from. There are many more than that. Can somebody give me another cause of burnout? What can cause this problem? How about somebody at the back? Could you give me a cause of burnout? What do you think?
Okay, we got like having too much to do with not enough time.
Having too much to do, so maybe the schedule, just your workload is so high you can't keep up. Yeah. Any more causes? General stress of being a teacher. Yes, if I'm talking about what has caused burnout in me first, this was kind of mentioned by this group over here. Actually, a lot of pressure just comes from myself. This would be, I don't know if anyone else has this problem, always wanting to teach a great class, or in my case, trying to chase this perfect class, this high level of perfectionism. So, for example, at my current university, we have a rubric for our classes. So I'm always trying to hit the things on that rubric, make sure I've got, reviews, summaries, good transitions. And so this perfectionism can really burn you out because you will do a lot more work than maybe you need to. Maybe you over-prepare. And then if your class doesn't go perfectly, how do you feel afterwards? Well, maybe devastated. You think, oh, I can't believe I messed up that slight transition there in the 21st minute. So that adds an emotional burden as well. So we have perfectionism. As I said early on in my career, when I was told I was a boring teacher and it took a number of months to build any confidence, I thought about quitting many times. I don't know if anyone has heard of this imposter syndrome. What is imposter syndrome? Stuart?
The idea that you don't really deserve to be where you are, and that other people will one day realize that.
Yes, I think similar. You might have achieved a certain level of success in your career. Maybe you have proven yourself to be an effective educator over a certain number of years. But if you have imposter syndrome, you still don't feel like you actually match that description. In your heart, you might feel, actually, I'm still not a good teacher. And then you would feel like an imposter, like you don't really belong there. So many years, I have taught many classes now. I've had many people watch my classes. I've given many presentations like this. Even now, after a lot of things I've done, still this can happen. So this past week at my current university, we have an observation program where part of your annual evaluation, a coordinator will come into your classroom and watch you teach. And they give you a score out of 50. And so you'd think, well, I've been observed many times, but it had been 4 years since I had my previous official observation. And so I was actually quite nervous for 2 or 3 days waiting for this teacher to come in, thinking, maybe this is the time they tell me, actually, you're not a good teacher. Which is kind of crazy when you think about it. And that's what we'd call imposter syndrome. That can really burn you out as well. As we mentioned over here, maybe it's your employer, your environment, something like this. Oh, we've just added 1 more class to your schedule. And you think, oh, I've already been struggling to prepare my other classes. How can I prepare this one? My current university, we have a lot of archiving work, a lot of paperwork. So that would add a lot of pressure as well. Just the workload gets out of hand. That would be a big problem. And we have this one. I don't know what your evaluation system is like where you are working. Is it very strict on your evaluation, your annual evaluation? Yeah. Like, how do they evaluate you? What are they looking for?
You know, and you have to have over 4.0.
Oh, on student evaluations?
Yeah, student evaluation, yeah.
But are there more categories than that, or only?
They say there's some, but you never really see it. They say like representative director, but we never actually see it. We just see the student evaluations, that's it.
Yeah, that would be similar to my previous university where your student evaluations had to be above 3.75, and then it was very subjective, very informal. And so the director said, yeah, you did a good job this year. Okay, see you next year. My current university is much more structured than that, and so they made an announcement only 1 month ago. Teachers now who score below 4.0 in student evaluations for 2 consecutive semesters, they would either be non-renewed, or they would get a pay cut, or they would not get any kind of bonus at the end of the year. And also our raise system is based on a curve. And so only a certain number of teachers can get the big raise, some can get the medium raise. The ones who are at the bottom will automatically get something like this. And so out of our teachers, there is some pressure, I guess, that could make you burn out if you're chasing your job security and chasing these raises. Let me pose a different question now. What are the first warning signs? So you're doing your role, you're teaching. How do you know you're starting to suffer from burnout? What are the first things that hit you? Again, thank you. Would anybody like to show one of these first warning signs of burnout? Stuart?
I'm not sure if this is quite first, but the sense that I no longer care as much about certain things as I previously did.
Yeah.
So if I may just very briefly, for example, if a student emailed me 5 years ago to ask for a grade change, I might have responded with at least an attempt at an explanation, but now I don't.
What kind of attempt do you give now? Like,
now I'm like, no, it's not happening.
Yeah, I guess I've seen some teachers, they'll respond with all the breakdown of their assessment and other things. In my case, I think maybe similar. I would give, saying this is your grade, this is why, and that's about it. But I have seen professors, like I said, 10 students lining up outside the corridor. I saw one student came 4 times in the same day, and that teacher may be a little bit inexperienced with dealing with students in that way. And so he was really suffering a lot with this student trying to badger him into changing the grade. He was like, please change the grade. And he's like, look, I can't do it. So, that could be a challenge if you really start to suffer from that. Any more warning signs? Yeah.
Perhaps if you find yourself getting grouchy or short-tempered with people.
Yeah, maybe your fuse is a little bit shorter. You lose your temperament. That can happen. Thinking about me, as I said, in the past I can be a perfectionist. I'm trying to chase that perfect class. When I've reached a stage of burnout where the workload has got so high, one of the first things that I notice is I might be at home and I would usually have this enthusiasm to do the lesson planning, to design some interesting materials. Instead, I would be watching TV and I think, oh, I still need to design that lesson. I'm teaching it tomorrow, and I still haven't done it. And time keeps passing. I keep procrastinating, and it just gets longer and longer. And then before I know it, I'm like using a backup lesson plan or something like that. Thankfully, this is not normal for me. This is only when I've been really burnt out and when I've been suffering from a workload. Sometimes when I've been burnt out, I've gone into the school that day, the university that day, and I've looked like this. And normally I'm like, I can't wait to teach my class. Instead, I just want to get through the day. It's like, look, I just need to get through the next 2 hours and the next 2 hours. Instead of that enthusiasm, that starts to go. Also, as we said, if you stop lesson planning, if you start getting tired, your teaching quality does go down and you start to notice. In times like this, I've felt guilty to have taught a class where I've gone home and thought, oh, actually, I should have done a lot better. To come in? Yeah. So yes, I felt very bad when I felt burnout. So of course, the whole goal of today is to think about what we can do about burnout when we start feeling this way. In the past, when I've started phoning in some of the lessons, or I just don't have that energy, what can we do? What do we do as soon as it starts happening? Again, talk to somebody for a few minutes. What can we do? Welcome. That'll be one way. So what can we do? You start to feel that burnout. Maybe it's like, oh, it's starting to hit me. What can we do? What are some ideas?
Go running.
Go running. Exercise, yeah. Actually, that's what I do now. When I was burnt out, very difficult to do that. I'd rather eat junk food and things like that. Now, actually, I try to exercise at least 45 minutes every day, and that helps me avoid burnout, I think. Any more ideas?
Possible, get a new job.
Get a new job, yes. Just say, I quit, I'm going. Sometimes that's the best solution. As I said, that first hog one I taught in, my escape was not fixing the job itself. My escape was, one day the British head teacher, he said, oh, we have an opening at a different hog one, because it was a franchise, there was more schools. And would anybody like to go? Would anybody like to transfer to this new school? The next day, I was in his office, and I was like, I will go, I volunteer. And I was like, oh, maybe this is my salvation. Maybe this is my rescue attempt. And it worked, it worked. Thinking about what I would do if I'm in that situation again, see if there's any way to cut down that workload, if that's one of the reasons. See where you can make these cuts. See if you can do the lesson plans in a slightly different way, if that's a big problem. Do the exams in a different way. And also, I think, if you look at this picture here, maybe not be so hard on yourself when you're burnt out. Just accept right now it's a little bit difficult. Don't try to be this perfectionist. Don't try to be this miracle worker in the classroom. Just say, you know what, this is a difficult patch right now. I'm cutting back. I'm going to try and take it a little bit easier. I'm not going to demand so much from myself until you've got through that burnout stage, I think. So try to bring some happiness back if you can. What I've done in the past is also just made a plan. I've realized I'm in a difficult situation. I've decided, what am I going to do about it? How can I solve this problem? So in the hog one, it was to get out of there very quickly. In the past, when I taught for a different university, I was doing way too many overtime classes. The money was good, but it was absolutely affecting my health. I was starting to put on weight, starting to get depressed, all these things. And so I said, okay, I'm going to cut the number of overtime classes I do. And very quickly, that made me much happier, and I avoided this burnout. I started to feel a lot better about myself as a teacher. As we said over here, if you can, maybe talk to your boss, talk to your employer. Yeah, I think so. Some bosses might be more receptive. They'll be willing to listen. I think my current boss, if I had a problem, I could easily go to him, and he would be very open-minded and willing to see what he could do to help me. Maybe not that first boss I talked about in my first school. So can we meet? Hopefully you can find some resolution there. Also, I read an interesting way to avoid this kind of boredom burnout, where you actually just get fed up with teaching. You lose interest and you just get bored of teaching. So that happens to a number of teachers. CPD, or professional development, is actually one of the recommendations coming to events like this. Co-TESOL, talking about teaching again, lighting that passion again, can be really beneficial. And that was my marketing over for Co-TESOL. One more thing, I want you to write something now. So take a look. What we want to do, though, and I'm much better at doing this now, how can we prevent burnout? So not cure burnout. We don't want to keep changing all these problems every time they surface. I want you to think of one tip you could share with the group today to prevent burnout. What I'll give you is a post-it note. Just write down one tip that you would give. You might have a lot of experience for stopping burnout even happening in your life. So let me give you a post-it note. Okay, and what I want you to do now, of course, with a post-it note, we want to post it somewhere. What I want to do is to put them on the back wall so everybody can read them together, and then we can talk about some of the interesting ones. I like this one. Don't let your job take over your life. I've talked about that before, so your job is not your life. I like that. Let's have a look. I sometimes walk with my family near the lake park, or yoga, so exercise again, I think that's good. Nature, I guess, is one way to prevent burnout. Right now we have a beautiful cherry blossom near Kangnam University. I might take some pictures later. Again, take a trip, take a rest, take a nap. Does anybody here nap? Yes, I never got into the habit of napping, so I don't know what that's like. If you could not avoid it, just enjoy it. So some kind of acceptance. I like that as well. That's life. I think we heard this one already. Be prepared to seek alternate employment. Sometimes that's what you have to do. If you realize the work situation is not going to improve, you find a different job. Sometimes that's what we do. Remember to smile during class. Smiling. Does that work? Does that make you, helps you? Yes, I think so. Walking and talking with my pretty dog and husband. So spending time with family. Remember what's important. I like that as well. Forgive yourself for failures in your teaching and develop the habit of letting go. Yes, as I said, my class was observed yesterday for my assessment. So there was pressure, and there was a computer problem when I was teaching my class. And even for the next 10 minutes after I'd fixed it, was the only thing I could think about. Oh, I made a mistake, computer mistake, computer mistake. So accept that mistakes do happen in your teaching. Stop overthinking. Traveling, ask for help, sleeping. Yes, what helped me in the past is I used to travel almost every weekend. I would go Busan, and today, of course, I'm in Yongin. That can really give you that outside perspective to divorce yourself from what's going on in your job. So I think that's really good as well. Let's have a look. Stop volunteering too much. Spend time with friends. Yes, I don't recommend that for co-TESOL. I think we should always be in co-TESOL. No, I think that would be right. Yes, sometimes we do try to do too much. Not just in our jobs, but outside our jobs. So be willing to set limits on what you're doing. I think that's very important. So almost all different suggestions there, so I think that was very good. And so yes, as I might say in terms of teacher burnout, it is very toxic. It can, as I said, almost make you quit teaching. You just have to find in your life that right balance, those right plans for what you will do to solve that problem. It sounds like it's different for everybody, so it's all about finding your own solution. So now what I'll do is I'll open it up to questions. Does anybody have any questions about teacher burnout?
Have you actually burned out?
It depends what you mean by completely burned out. I would say, burned out where I seriously thought about quitting teaching. That was in the first few months of my career, where I got that warning letter that I was a boring teacher, blah, 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 blah. And so seriously, I was in that coffee shop that day looking for different kinds of jobs. Because my problem was, I thought maybe I didn't have the personality to be a teacher. So for me, it was like a fixed concept. Yeah.
1 or 2 years ago, we had a workshop right here, and the speaker was speaking about testing people before they get into the profession. What kinds of people are likely to be successful, and can you actually test for that? And I'm curious, since you're interested in this particular problem, and that's a big one, have you thought about that?
Well, I thought about it because when I moved to the university level a little bit later, there were also teachers there who had come from the Hog-1 system, and they said, wow, this was actually great preparation for all the things you have to go through as a teacher, because as soon as you start teaching a Hog-1, you get a lot of the most difficult challenges. I felt like I was literally thrown into the fire, like thrown into the deep end, with the CCTV cameras in the classroom. And it wasn't just that, also the head teacher would come in sometimes with another video camera. That was the second class I ever taught in the Hog-1. And I was like, oh, okay, take a seat at the back. And then once a week, we had to watch ourselves on CCTV footage. And there was like an observation form. Okay, I should do this better. All these bullet points, blah, blah, blah. A whole checklist. And then we also had to watch another teacher. So every week I had to watch a different teacher. And so that was extremely stressful at the time, and I found it really difficult. I had trouble sleeping. I felt so much stress and nerves. Almost made me quit teaching. It would depend on your resilience, but I think surviving those first 3 months did help later, because it did force me to become a better teacher, because I thought at that time that with my personality, the way I was teaching, that I couldn't do it. And so I had to just start experimenting. And so, as I said, when I transferred to that next school, I thought, well, this is going to happen again. I'm almost going to get fired. Now I'm just going to try anything. And so every day I was on the internet looking for different flashcard games, different activities. I think after those 3 months, I actually became a pretty good teacher, because that failure there really forced me to think about it. And so I guess maybe there's a developmental pattern that is connected to those early difficult experiences. Maybe here, then Stuart. Yeah.
Go to somebody else first.
You have a question?
I was just thinking, watching yourself, watching other teachers, that sounds really beneficial. Were they doing it in a threatening manner? Is that why it was so stressful?
Of watching other teachers or being watched?
Of both.
Well, being watched felt quite stressful because the only feedback you got was when it was negative. There was never a positive, oh, good job on the speaking, blah, 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 today. Great game in your class today. You would only know if you've done something they thought was wrong. So they would bang on the door, they would take you out into the corridor, you'd get the warning letters. Actually, I believe after 1 year, every teacher there did finish with at least one warning letter. As I said, another teacher, he almost made it the whole year without that warning, and then he left the classroom for 10 seconds, student used their cell phone, he got that warning letter. And you needed 3 letters to get fired. And so I got one after 2 weeks. I thought, well, that's not going to go so well for me. Yes.
Stuart first.
Yeah, Stuart.
What would you say to someone who should cut back on things but doesn't because it feels like failure?
One interesting thing I read, as I said, about perfectionism. So we have this idea to be the perfect teacher. Actually, what they say is don't be perfect, but try to be good or try to be excellent. And so an excellent teacher can make mistakes, have problems, not always teach the perfect class. And does an excellent teacher always have to, obsess over the lesson plans? Maybe set limits, I think. Maybe difficult, I did read that for 1 hour of teaching, you're supposed to lesson plan for 1 hour. But I think in most of our situations, that would be really difficult. So for example, I have up to 20 teaching hours. If I'm also doing 20 lesson planning hours and doing the office hours and doing the grading, the paperwork, that'd be really difficult. So you've got to, I think, place limits. But it's more like a lot of self-reflection is involved. Because if you've got that kind of personality that just can't stop, then you really have to think hard about it, I think. Yeah.
There's a good quote from Penn, of Penn and Teller.
The magicians, yeah.
Yeah, that it's very hard to, it's very easy to be like excellent once or twice, but it's much harder to be consistently good.
Mm-hmm.
But that should be the goal. If you're consistently good and every once in a while you have an amazing class, but the students always know that you'll at least be good, it's effective, then that can help you just feel.
I think that's right. It could take the pressure off. It's about just being reliable. You're not always going to be some amazing teacher that day, but you're not going to be a terrible teacher one day unless you're having a really bad day, most likely, I think.
Day supposed to be open class.
Open class, that's when like parents come to watch you and things like that.
Or like this kind of like head teachers coming to my
Ah,
class.
yes. Actually, some of the some of the hog ones, as you might know, in the lobby area, the video cameras, the CCTV footage is publicly displayed, and so parents can watch the teachers teaching. And actually, at my current university, they don't have them anymore. They used to have children's classes, and the professors there would be teaching children, and I had an office across the corridor from those classes. The parents would stand outside the whole 2 hours of the class, and the door would be open in the classroom, and so basically you're being observed by 8 parents for 2 hours, every class. So I was like, please don't give me children's class. I don't want it. Thankfully, they got rid of them like 1 year later. But thank you. Let's take a short break. Thank you.
One more time, just
thank you.
quickly, of whose home university we have? Wayne Finley, everybody. Thank you very much.
Nice to meet you.